When establishing my briefs and researching, I factored in my abilities in visual communication design and my hobbies and interests. Some of these interests include my love for vinyl collection, music from the 60s and 70s, the clothing, all the styles, the movements. So I decided to create a vintage calendar for one of my presentations and a markers casing for my second presentation. My client, a theoretical shop situated in Brunswick, Melbourne, is a 60s and 70s vintage inspired store selling items like clothing, records, and all sorts that relate to the 1960s and 70s. That is where this calendar and the markers casing would be sold. The brief needs to be concise and to the point. In regards to the restrictions for my brief, I had to outline the aesthetics and communication needs of my presentations. In this subject, both presentations are to be very distinctive. For the calendar, my target audience was to be mainly teenagers and young people that would be spending most of their time in Brunswick Street. And although it also appeals to older people that would be reminded of their childhood and feel a sense of nostalgia and reminisce. The purpose of the calendar is to promote the style and to inform people of the store, and I did this by incorporating contact information. The context of the calendar would be in a house, in any sort of room, someone's study space, or just in the store. Some of the constraints include original photography, use of iconic typography, a design for every month, and the flexibility that the images afterwards could be cut out and be used for another purpose, to animate one's living space. I presented this through prints and got my calendar printed. The purpose of the markers was to promote everyday vintage, the client, and to house my markers. The context of the markers is in the store or in someone's stationery, and it is targeted at all ages. It can be used by children for colouring in, or adults and teenagers for marking off in the calendar. Some of the expectations and constraints include that it must be retro and vintage inspired. I presented it through a packaging net and 3D mockup. I generated my ideas through mind maps, mood boards, visualization drawings. Throughout the entire process, I made sure to keep going back to my brief and checking that I was answering all that I had outlined. I trialed watercolor using Adobe Illustrator, a vector-based platform, and also made sure to check what kind of textures I could use for the materials. I wanted people to be intrigued by my designs, and I did this by manipulating the elements and principles of design to create aesthetics and a mood. All students must adhere to the design thinking process, which includes generation of ideas, development to refinement, and resolution up to final presentations. At the end of the process, I made sure that my final versions of my designs would reflect my brief through an evaluation on the last pages of my portfolio.